What's up, Restoration Nation? Rico Garcia here, bringing you yet another exciting episode. Today, we're joined by none other than Mark Cornelius. For anybody who's been in the business, you've probably heard of the name. He's been in the game for well over 38 years at this point. He is a board member of the IICRC, trainer, and the guy's just a fountain of information when it comes down to the restoration industry. And of course, he's nice enough to go ahead and grace us with all of the years of knowledge and experience that he has in the restoration industry. So it's a really fun interview. I hope that you enjoy. Before we dive in, real quick, just want to give a big shout out to our show sponsors, starting with C&R Magazine, which, by the way, if you don't have your subscription of C&R Magazine yet, head on over to cnrmagazine.com, hit the big red subscribe button, and get your subscription today. Also want to give a big shout out to Restoration Referral System. If you're looking to tap into the insurance agent market and make sure that you have a constant flood of referrals, make sure that you check out restorationreferralsystem.com/dominate and get started today. And of course, last but not least, our show sponsor, Company Cam, but more on them later. Meanwhile, let's jump into the interview. Enjoy.
Owning any type of restoration business is demanding of your time, your energy, and resources. And that's why we're here. This is Restoration Domination. If you're a contractor in water mitigation, mold remediation, biohazard cleanup, roofers, or public adjusters, you'll learn how to dominate using some of the techniques and strategies that our guests will share. We'll interview top industry insiders, movers and shakers, hustlers and hackers, and anyone dominating their industry. This is Restoration Domination. Hustle, hack, and dominate. And here's your host, Rico Garcia.
All right, Mark, welcome to the show. Are you ready to help us dominate today?
Rico, it's my pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, man. So fill in some of the gaps on the introduction. Tell the audience exactly who you are, what you do, and how long you've been in the industry.
Okay, awesome. Thank you, Rico. I actually started in the cleaning industry at 13 years old, cleaning carpet, not because I woke up one morning and said, hey, this is what I want to do. It is because the guy that hired me actually wanted to hire my uber smart brother, who wanted nothing to do with manual labor. And he looked at me and said, well, what about you? So I said, okay. Since that time, I worked cleaning commercial carpet, graduated up into working for another company. I'm not going to go into all of the different companies I worked for, but the biggest one was a company I worked with in the Metro Atlanta area for 11 years and went from just a technician up to the last 5 years being the vice president. Won't bore you with all the details, but for whatever reason, it just didn't work out. Took off and worked for another large restoration company. I actually got involved and was involved with some of the 9/11 cleanup in New York, and allowed my 1 year non-compete to expire, and then started my own restoration company in 2001 in once again the Metro Atlanta area, and still have that, but in the last almost 15 years, well, about 13 and a half, got into teaching, talked into becoming an IICRC approved instructor, and teach multiple subject matters. Actually even taught as a contract instructor for a well-known large equipment manufacturer for about 3 years. And then I started my own school, EMTA, back in, right at 10 years ago. And we have grown since then to 5 instructors. And we will have delivered 179 IICRC approved courses this year. So I've been handling everything from just one room of carpet cleaning to a 1 million square foot flooded building to rebuilding buildings all the way up to, multi-stories, including water damages and 35-story tall buildings.
Amazing. So let's talk. We were talking off camera here a bit, and one of the things I wanted to talk about is the changes in the industry, right? Because everything evolves, and I think that not only the technology in drying and remediating, that's obviously changed as well. But I also think like the mindset for the new entrepreneurs that are entering our space, that's also very different today than it was maybe 20 years ago, right? We're also seeing a lot more private equity money coming into the industry. We're seeing there's a lot more business savvy that's entering the space because they see the opportunity. So talk to me real briefly about just the overall changes in the industry that you've seen and, some of the pros and cons throughout this entire change.
Well, Rico, that's a very broad topic, and you are absolutely correct. And some people that have been around a while understand that the restoration industry was really basically invented by the carpet cleaning industry because we had the equipment that sucks. Then, as you just said, now you got private equity that's gotten into the business. And I'm also seeing, because of the fact that as an instructor, I get to see basically every nuance of the people that are getting into it, including people that I just had a chemist from an oil well industry that was in a class, and the reason he was doing it was because he retired and he didn't want to get bored, and then he got scouted by a headhunting franchise type of deal, and they said, oh, well, the franchise industry would be great, and here's one that you can make lots of good money in, like right out the gate.
Right.
So I have literally watched it go from people that have, and yes, I mean, back when the whole stuff started years ago, it was still being experimented, and no one had thermal hygrometers and moisture meters, and this was the moisture sensor and the beige pants on your knees when you knelt in the water. That if it was wet, you had water. It's almost like the pet rock. If the pet rock is cold, or the weather rock, it's cold. But I've literally watched it go from people that had some kind of cleaning experience to innocuous entities that are just out in the world. They throw a bunch of money in it, and all of a sudden they're getting money back. So there's a huge disconnect in how to go from managing a firehouse sub to owning a restoration company. They're not the same. So there's a lot that's changed, including attitudes and relationships between commissioning parties and the ones that are doing the work.
Right. So as far as education, though, do you feel that people are that they're becoming better technicians today than they were several years ago? Or do you still feel that there's a gap as far as education in the industry, why things are the way that they are, why the standards are written the way that they are? Do you feel that people are understanding those concepts more, or is everybody just kind of winging it a little bit?
Okay, so a combination of all of that, Rico. There's always a subset of people that are going to seek education to become a better tacticianist, someone who is always trying to improve their game. But also with the influx of, and when I make this comment, there's nothing wrong with being a franchise. For me, I had a huge book of business that was just waiting for me to start my own company. Then I didn't have to do that. Business came to me. But if you're starting from scratch and you know nothing about the industry, a franchise organization is a perfect way to break into it. But I see a lot of people, Rico, taking the classes not necessarily for the educational aspect, but purely because that's what they have to do to get on the vendor program, to be able to get money to come in from insurance carriers. So I would say if I have 100 people come through a classroom at any given time, maybe 15% of that is to truly learn and truly become better. But then there's also the other side of that is when I'll have a technician show up and I can see the light bulbs just going off in their heads. I mean, they're just like going, oh my God. At my company, we never do that. We always cut everything to 2 feet. And then they go back and they talk to their boss, and their boss goes, nope, we're not going to do that. We're going to keep doing it this way. So yes, there are smarter technicians that are out there. But Rico, I just had this conversation. I was in Little Rock just this past week, and if we had the tools, the knowledge, the standards, and the equipment that we have currently, 25, 30 years ago, oh my God! But we're still doing the same mistakes today, and we've got no excuse anymore because it just boils down to that we don't care, if that makes any sense.
Right.
So there is a good amount of smarter people out there, and there's a lot of good equipment out there, but most people just know where that power button is. And when you push the power button, dead presidents spew out.
Right. So one of the things that, and I've mentioned this jokingly, maybe not so jokingly on the podcast before, where I on this podcast, I have never really taken the time to talk about the technical aspect of drying or remediating, because at the end of the day, it's kind of assumed, and I've mentioned this before, it's kind of assumed that if you're in the water mitigation business, you know how to properly dry. It's kind of assumed that if you're doing mold remediation, you know how to properly remediate. So for me, I've always found it quite boring to talk about fans and dehumidifiers and desiccants, and, because really you could be the absolute best technician and just have all of the standards memorized, and it doesn't really move the needle financially for your business. So for me, I've always concentrated on the opposite side. It's like, how do you become a better entrepreneur, a better manager, building culture, getting the phone ringing with more business? However, that being said, there's this whole other element, which is, does being a better technician and having your technicians as a business owner really being good tacticians, how that impacts your overall bottom line. So what I want to talk about is that, right? Because I think there's a lot of lost money in that bad judgment, right? And those small little things that could be improved. So let's take a deep dive into that. Like, what's your opinion?
So Rico, you get me all goosed up here. I'm starting to get goosebumps on my arm. All right. So I just had a little competition in the class that I was just teaching last week, and this is going to come across as absolutely nothing but bragging when I make this comment. However, I would be willing to bet majority of the time that I can extract water off the carpet better than most people can. I mean, I started cleaning carpet at 13, and everything boils down to, Rico, to the bottom line. One of probably my biggest benefits, if you will, is I spent the majority of my life being paid commission. So even the company that I worked at for 11 years, the 5 years that I was the vice president of that company, I was still paid commission, and it was based off of the amount of revenue that my department made and then how much I spent to create that revenue. And I sat there and I looked at 2-inch tape versus 3-inch tape. Yeah, the 2-inch tape has that really cute, sexy dollar sign, $5.75 a roll. I'm just making up numbers.
Right.
And then the 3-inch tape could have been $12 a roll. But if you put 3 strips of tape to make that piece of plastic stick to the wall, well, that 2-inch tape just became $15 tape. Plus the technician spends 3 times the amount of time putting that tape on the wall. And then when the plastic falls off the wall, I don't have quantifiable information on some of this, but I can tell you right now, when I come back from lunch and my plastic is laying on the floor, I'm not very happy. Now I'm an upset person, which means that I'm not working efficiently, which means the job slows down, which means the bottom line gets affected. So all the way to carpet cleaning and extraction of water off the carpet. If you've ever had your wand do what some people call it wand chatter, but the wand goes boop, 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 as you're pulling it back across the carpet, if you're not sitting there going, well, who cares, versus going, why is it doing this, and figuring out that it's because you either need to turn at a 90 or even 180 because of the lay of the carpet, it can take longer to dry the material, which the longer it takes to dry material, the more chances of microbial amplification or the customer not being happy because you're still sticking around in your house. Knowing how to use that dehumidifier better than a competitor means that you're going to get off that job faster. Whoa, wait a minute, Mark, I don't want to get off the job faster. If I can get onto another job quicker than someone else can, then I'm going to make even more profit margin. So understanding how to, it's just like going hunting. If you're a marksman, you're going to eat more than someone who isn't. So your bottom line will improve if you know how to use these tools and equipment better than anybody else in the industry. And that's something that if you don't try to seek out how to get better, then you're not going to get to.
Right. And something that I've seen quite a bit, and again, in any business, it's not just the restoration industry, right? But tripping over pennies on your ways to making dollars, right? Like you just buying the cheaper equipment or buying the cheaper tape, but then it's 3 times the effort. Like all of these things are repetitive, right? And in the moment, you're like, oh, this totally makes sense. But when you're there, and there's just there's not a spot on an Excel profit and loss for you to go ahead and account for those little mistakes. Like Like you really have to take a step back and look at your business and be like, wait, hold on. How much is this costing me in time or in efficiency? And another thing to your point is something that I've heard quite a bit is it's better for me to stay on a job site for 3 or 4 days. Even though I can dry it out for 2 days, that's additional time that I can go ahead and bill the insurance company. And this is everybody. I mean, at some point has mentioned that and has had those thoughts. Where exactly is the benefit from, especially if you're doing insurance billing, right? To get off that job site that much quicker? I mean, does that not kill some of the revenue?
Sure it will. It depends upon which way you're looking at that revenue stream, though. So the average restoration contractor, I'm not talking about like the big Belfours and the big Servpros where they've got 1,000 air movers, in their warehouse. And just because it's a Servpro or Service Master doesn't mean that they've got 1,000 air movers. They could have 10.
Right.
But on average, a lot of the restoration companies, they may only have maybe 100 air movers and maybe 20 dehumidifiers. Well, if you've got those resources tied up on 2 jobs, and you're trying to stretch that out, and then you have another job that comes in, then now you're getting 0 revenue over here, and you're getting just equipment rental over here. And don't get me wrong, my air movers and dehus and air scrubbers are the best employees I've ever had.
Right.
They don't ask for time off. They ask for one thing, and that's electricity. But yeah, sure. I mean, it's definitely seductive to leave your equipment on that job site as long as you physically can. But after a while, you do start getting diminishing returns because now you cannot take on more quantity of work and make the same profit margins off of more jobs.
And on the flip side of that, right, the more effective that you are, especially if you're billing insurance, the more effective that you are, and you've got every single step of the way documented properly, when you submit that invoice, whoever that desk adjuster is going to look at that, even if it's peer reviewed, we're like, whoa, okay, these people are doing it right. So there's a lot less pushback when it comes down to billing and getting paid for your work. Am I correct?
Absolutely. And I'm going to go a step further, Rico. Here's a new buzzword that's been going around recently that I see pop up on social media. Well, you shouldn't be wanting to do work. You're not working for the insurance company. Well, you're right. I'm not working for the insurance company. But I want as many people on this planet to like me. The more people that like me, the more I'm going to have a chance of getting business. If you like me, then if you don't like me. So I could care less where that dollar is coming from. I want you to be happy when I am done. So the less pushback, the less aggravation, the less arguments that you get into, the more likely you're going to get referrals. And whether it's a vendor program, a TPA, no matter where you're getting your bread from, you're going to be able to get more than crumbs if they like you.
Right.
So that word spreads.
Absolutely.
A whole lot more.
Absolutely. And at the end of the day, it's about, whether it's the insurance's money or the client's money, the whole idea is to make the process as smooth as possible for the person who experienced the loss, right? And if you're going to charge, like my opinion is, if you're going to charge a client $7,000 cash pay, there really shouldn't be a reason for that same exact bill to be $9,000 or $10,000 or $20,000 now just because it's insurance, right? Like this, and this is again, this isn't stuff that people speak about openly, right? But it's happening every single day in the industry. And that, yes, is it true that insurance companies are getting harder and harder to deal with every single day, that they're holding on to money? Sure. But if you as the owner, the entrepreneur, the technician, if you are doing everything possible to really dial in this process to eliminate the rebuttals, eliminate the arguments that they could possibly give you, I mean, that just makes for more profitability and, frankly, just a lot more sanity, right?
Yeah. So Rico, here's the thing. The only person that wins an argument is the attorney. Even if they lose, they still win. They're the only ones who comes out winning. If you can answer a person's question before they ask it, then usually there's no question. And even if they don't read, which nobody reads, all you got to do is say, hey, yeah, read line 12's F9 note. And, get back to me if you have any more questions. The more time you spend in discussion and argument, the less time you're able to go out and knock on that door and get that next job that could turn into a $50,000 or $100,000 or even a $2,000 job. So I'm a firm believer in communication, and where a lot of people are digging in their heels and saying it's none of the insurance company's business. And Rico, don't get me wrong, I totally agree. When I'm done with my mitigation services, it's not an estimate, it's a bill.
Right.
I provided these services and I expect to get paid for that. However, a lot of the stuff that I see happening, and one of the biggest things that's changed in this industry, Rico, is the fact that the person who is ultimately paying out the money has had almost zero input in the expenditure on the job. And if I choose to use a superior product and I have not educated the customer, which very few people do, then we like to use these big words in the industry. Well, I'll just sue the homeowner and the insurance company has to indemnify the client. Well, of course they're not going to like you, and they're not going to want to send you any business. And the next time one of your bills, one of your estimates comes across their desk, well, that's going to be their least favorite one to take care of.
Right.
And I don't care who you are. I don't know of anybody that wants to have, sorry if I offend anybody, Uncle Bob or, Leonard at the Christmas party. If you don't like them, you're not going to interact with them.
Yeah.
It's just human nature.
Exactly. So let's talk about standards, because we were talking off camera about how so many people are quoting standards and they don't quite understand, what's happening in the industry. So let's talk about that a little bit. What is it that you're seeing on that front?
Okay. Well, here's the thing, and I find it absolutely hilarious how a lot of adjusters go, well, the standards are stupid. They're written to make the the restoration company the maximum money. And then I hear the other side of that. The restoration contractors go, oh, the standards are stupid. They're there to protect the insurance company. No, that's like saying that the speed limit sign is out to get you. And I'm going to quote a good friend of mine who's on the board of directors for the IICRC, Mr. Pettyjohn. His comment is that the standard doesn't interact with you. You interact with the standard. So if you're driving down the road and that speed limit sign says 55 miles an hour and you're doing 90, the speed limit sign had nothing to do with it when you get pulled over. Okay? So people will read the standard. Most aren't even reading the standard to begin with. And my favorite is they'll go on Facebook or other social medias and they'll be like, hey, Rico, what does the S500 say about Category 3 water? And here's my favorite response. Go buy it. Right. Invest in it. And if you want to know what the standard says, go buy the damn thing. I mean, I don't make any money if you buy the S500. However, if you're confused about a component of the standard, then start asking for advice from people that are smarter than you. By the way, social media, not the place to go to get advice, even about how to open a can of ragu. Right. But the problem that we run into is people they hear something that sounds really cool and they'll run with it. And I have the same problem in classes. I just not too long ago had a student who said, well, water that's been wet for 3 days is automatically Category 3. And I'm like, where did you get that from? And it turns out he was a former student of mine, and then he realized that I was his instructor, and I'm like going, dude, I never said anything like that. He goes, well, but in the class, and I'm like, no, I didn't. So people hear something or they read one sentence out of the standard, and they go, aha, I've got it. And they use that to try to justify bad decisions.
Right.
If you know the standard ahead of time, and you understand it and you've read it, then it will hopefully steer you away from making some of those bad decisions.
Do you think a lot of these bad decisions are just based solely around money? Like, well, they're really not bad decisions. They're just based more on, is this more expensive of a service than this, other scenario?
Brother, this is where probably whoever watches your podcast is not going to like me. I hate to say it, but in my personal humble opinion, from watching the people come through my classroom, and not just my classroom, Rico, I had probably 20 years ago a next door neighbor that worked for a restoration company. And he came over with his estimate on this apartment complex that had a fire. And he was laughing about, they're like, well, we're pressure washing the outside of this apartment complex and we're replacing the siding. And it's just up to the adjuster to catch the fact that we're going to pressure wash it. we're cleaning carpet that we're going to rip out.
Right.
And people love this word fluff.
Right.
Well, fluff equals fraud,
Right.
In my humble opinion. And because if you would throat punch someone else for fluffing you in your house, then it doesn't make it right for the other side. Rico, unfortunately, and this is just a purely made up statistic. Statistically speaking, 100% of statistics are made up.
Right.
But if I had to put a statistic to it, in my opinion, 90% of the people in the restoration industry are just out there to throw every single line item that's in the software program into it and wait for the adjuster to push back on it. And then they get mad when they do.
So there's two points here, right? Number one, what's the root of that issue, right? In your opinion. And then number two, as an industry, how do we combat that, right? How do we get past that limiting belief, that limited thinking, and, actually have some more integrity in the industry to where, everybody can still make their money, customers get serviced, everybody gets paid, and we just make for a much better overall industry. So what's your take on that?
I've heard a lot of people want to have it regulated, have the government step in. And folks, if the last 2 years hasn't proved anything, is that the government does one thing well, and that screws up everything they put their hands on. Right. Rico, I wish there was a magic wand that we could wave. The problem of it is when you're working with an industry that can make the amount of money that we can make, it's very hard to legislate morality, and legislate ethics. If you don't have the ethics and morals by the time you're like 10 years old, you're pretty much set in what you're going to do. And when you have an industry where you can easily, and one of the biggest things is that people think that the insurance companies push back. Oh my God, if the insurance companies were to really start pushing back, people would learn really quick that it's not as bad as we think it is. But if you're ripping out 20 linear feet of baseboard and only 1 linear foot got wet, and you're upset because they're pushing back, then what do you expect? So unfortunately, Rico, when it boils down to it, we're guided by our own morals and ethics. And when there's limited, and I know there's going to be a lot of people that are going to disagree with this comment, the amount of oversight that there actually is in this industry is very minute in comparison. We get away with bloody murder, and then when we start getting caught with our hands in the cookie jars, we get mad about it. So I don't know if I answered your question or not, but it's going to take honest companies, or here's the big thing that it's going to take, Rico, some people are going to have to go to jail. And I'm not talking about just a little bit of fluff. There are jobs that have millions of dollars of fluff in it. And until the insurance companies actually prosecute and put some people in jail, people are just going to keep running with it.
Right. And it's just a matter of time. And again, we're obviously, I would like to think that we're talking about a very, very, very small percentage of the industry. But still, over time, for the rest of us out there, those are the kind of situations that make it much more difficult to get paid on your invoices, to service clients, to have fair pricing and not, constantly be raising red flags. So it would just be interesting to have the discussion, right? Especially much more openly about, hey, what mentally can be done as an industry that's going to start changing the direction on how that is. And I don't think that there's a one size fits all.
No, but transparency would help a lot. And I'm not talking about educating the customer on the problems that they're going to have with the insurance adjuster. Yes, I mean, that's a thing. But if we were to actually disclose to the customer, hey, yeah, we can put this plant-based biocide in your house. My personal opinion is it's better. But if I put this other product that's not plant-based, it's going to be a lot less expensive and it's going to do just as good of a job, but it's not as sexy as the plant-based one. Mm. All right. And don't get me wrong. If I personally could choose between the plant-based or the other, I would personally go with the plant-based. But if Mrs. Smith doesn't understand that the extra $3,000 for all of these extra things that I'm doing in their home is ultimately going to come out of their back pocket, then they probably wouldn't just give you carte blanche. Yes, it's very difficult to give an estimate on how much it's going to cost to finish the job. But if we say, listen, we've only got an extra large dehumidifier and I'm too lazy to go back to my warehouse and get a smaller one, or I only buy the most expensive dehumidifier and I'm not going to charge you for anything less than the most expensive dehumidifier. And if the adjuster won't pay for it because it's not the right size, something smaller would work, then I'm going to come after you for that. The homeowners will be going, no, put the right size unit in there. But if we would have a whole lot more transparency in this industry, it would start bringing the other people into play, and maybe hopefully self-correct stuff.
Absolutely. And on that note, let's just take a quick moment to thank our sponsors. Photo documentation is possibly one of the most important aspects of what it is that we do in the restoration business. Not only so that the client knows exactly what's going on, but also so that you can prove your work to insurance companies. One of the best ways that I've found to go ahead and document our projects is by using Company Cam. Company Cam is an amazing app. It has so many features, everything from time-stamped and GPS located photos, individual project files, unlimited photo storage, in-app communication with your crew, a live stream of all of your projects as the photos are coming in, as if it was an Instagram feed. So from a managerial standpoint, Company Cam can help you there as well. But more importantly, it gives you the ability to protect your organization while documenting and keeping everything nice and neat. So we've got a really special offer for you. If you go to companycam.com/dominate, not only will you get your 14-day free trial, but you're also going to get the first 2 months 50% off. So again, head on over to companycam.com/dominate, get the app, and I'm sure you're going to love it. All right, guys. So we're back. Let's go ahead and talk about real quick. Give me a walkthrough, a textbook walkthrough of walking into a job site, documentation, all the way through the finish. What would be, if you had to do a very short 1 minute, education series on how this process should look like properly, what would that be?
Okay, well, first of all, I wish back in the day that we had these things that were capable of doing what they do today. We no longer have an excuse of not taking video and picture. Just the cell phone alone makes it to where we can show what did and didn't happen. Then we have the advent of, it would be very hard to come in and set up like Matterport or an Encircle camera or DocuSketch or anything like that necessarily. But the biggest mistake that we're making is not taking video and photo documentation the moment we step foot on the job.
Right.
And you got to have the conditions of what it looks like before, with the sheetrock all over the tables, what the temperature and relative humidity is as soon as you walk in the door, moisture content. All of these things could probably be done within the first hour of actually scoping it out, and that even if it's a big job. But you got to be able to walk through and show how bad it is, so that way when you come back the next day, the improvements, and then that helps support your documentation of why you did what you did on the job, and results in a lot less pushback.
Right.
And 1 minute's hard to, there's a lot to go through in 60 seconds.
Absolutely. What do you find most people are messing up with their documentation? Is it in the beginning of the process because they're too excited, they're trying to get the contract signed? Is it while they're knee deep in doing demo and setting up equipment, or towards the end as they're finishing up the project? Where do you see it start to fall apart?
That's an easy one. Yes.
It's all of the above.
It's all of the above.
Right.
It's all of it, because it doesn't matter how big your company or how small your company is. If you have 3 jobs come in back to back to back all in one day, it's a phrase that I know I didn't invent it, but it's busy being busy. And we lie to ourselves and tell ourselves that we will come back and get that documentation later. And after the fact documentation becomes creative documentation. So the biggest mistake that people make, guys, it's just like being in the fire department. 14 and a half years as a volunteer firefighter, and still have my EMT license. If I go in and I take the readings of my patient wrong, or I don't take them at all, then the treatment my patient is going to get, or the building is going to get, is going to be horribly wrong.
Right.
And if you don't have that baseline vitals of that patient within the first couple of minutes, all decisions that you make going forward are totally jacked up. And so the biggest mistake, did I actually just say hugest?
You did, in fact, and this is, by the way, like on the internet forever now. You said the hugest.
Wow.
Absolutely.
Yes, but my brain picked up on the hugest word. Okay. Here's a big word for you, Rico, a portmanteau. When you take one word and another word and smush them together, making a new word, that is a portmanteau. And I do that all the time. Try talking 7 hours straight in a day and see what kind of words you come up with. All right. So one of the biggest mistakes, because everything cascades down here from that, goes back to your original comment, the initial documentation. And even if it's just a video or a few pictures, now you can go backwards and refresh your mind on what did and didn't happen. Nothing says that you got to have 100% of the information within the first hour of the job. But if you don't start with that initial baseline reading of your patient, you're going to misdiagnose and mistreat that patient for the rest of the job. But getting into it on the first day and ignoring it, and then coming back the second day, and actually technically, Rico, this is, and I can't even come up with this. There was another instructor, his name is Mitch Byram, that I heard this first comment from him, and he may have got it from someone else. But this is a mentality that the industry just doesn't seem to want to get their head around. When you show up at 9 o'clock on Monday, that's not day one. That's day zero, okay? That is your inspection phase. When you come back 24 hours later, that's day one.
Right.
So when you show up at 9 o'clock after the water heater broke at 7 o'clock that night, or when it broke overnight, if you don't get those baseline readings from that point forward, it just falls apart quick.
Right.
And now you're just playing catch up. So if you wait one day, that is now day zero. And then the next day is day one. So you don't know what you did the day before, if it was worth it or not. And guys, here's the thing. You'd be better off admitting that you were so busy that you didn't get the first set of readings than you would be to make up and lie about it.
Right.
So the most crucial is first day, but all of the days after that are just as crucial.
Right. And just having some kind of, again, systems. And again, people don't like using checklists, and they don't like using some technology on the field. Again, there's two camps, right? There's people that are very, very heavy on technology and systems that are entering the marketplace. And then there's other people that are just kind of flying by the seat of their pants, right? Not to say that one is better than the other. However, evidence shows that if you do have a system in place, typically you're going to forget a lot less things, right? Our show sponsors Company Cam. That's the app that I use on our restoration company to help with all of those documentations from the moment that you walk on site to capturing all of those initial readings, and every single step of the way. Like, we have our internal checklist that we do. Step 1, through step 100, whatever that looks like. And what it does is, even as like a veteran, like we're all human. Like maybe we get a phone call in the middle of an inspection and we're like, and then you just walk away and you forget that, you didn't take this last reading, or you didn't take pictures of that third bedroom, or what have you, right? So just having something there in place to where you could go back to and be like, yep, check 1 through 100. I did everything that I needed to do. Off to the next phase is so important and so crucial. And I think that, for those of you watching or listening, if you don't have that yet, it doesn't have to be complicated. It could just be on the notes on your phone. It could be something, right? But just have an outline of what you're willing to commit to each and every single step of the way. And then ask yourself the question: if I was on the other side of this, where could I punch holes in my argument? Because if you can if you're like, I don't know, odds are is that a desk adjuster, field adjuster, a customer, the client, they can possibly make that exact same argument.
Or someone who's a little smarter than you.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So Rico, SOPs, standard operating procedures, they're there for a reason. And like you said, I don't know, you said I don't know which branch of the military that you were in, but thank you for your service, first of all.
No, where did you get military from? No.
yeah. Well, I thought you said that you were a veteran.
No, absolutely not. No, I wish. No.
Okay. So for all of the veterans that are out there, thank you for your service, but I've misunderstood you, Rico. But standard operating procedures are there for a reason. Just like in martial arts, you keep practicing the same form over and over until it becomes a habit. Without standard operating procedures, you're literally, like you said, flying by the seat of your pants. And talking about flying, one of the biggest things that they found, the reason planes crash, outside of the, occasionally something does break or there's some manufacturing problem, the vast majority of all airplane crashes was because of no standard procedures. And then they also find that most of the time now that SOPs are there, and the amount of plane crashes that happened was cut drastically because you had your checklist. And the reason a lot of planes crash today is because someone forgot to actually flip the switch instead of going, check, we did it.
Right.
So systems are there for a reason, and people don't like them. But how would you like it if the fire truck showed up and they said, oh, crap, we forgot to bring the hose?
Right.
We have SOPs that keeps us from doing that. And once you break from the SOP, you break your habit, and then bad things happen.
Right. Let's talk about the future of the industry through your eyes. Where do you see the industry going? Where do you see new players entering the market? And how do they plant their flag and saying, hey, this is the market that I'm in. This is the area that I'm choosing to grow in. Where do you see the industry in that regard?
Huge. The future is really limitless because this is an industry where you can truly see a major return on investment relatively quick. You don't have to be a big giant corporation or have outside finances coming in, but it is still also altering the market. It's not as easy for a standalone person to be able to break into. For example, for where I came from, Rico, I had people waiting for me to start my company, and that still does happen to people. But if you just all of a sudden wake up one morning and you had a loss at your house and you saw the $400,000 check that the insurance company stroked, and you're like, well, I've been in the wrong business for the last 10 years, and you decide to start your own company, it's a lot harder to break into it because there's so many. The market is definitely saturated with players in the industry. But every time they build a new building, that's another building that has water pipes in it or electrical lines that go through it. And it's not if it's going to malfunction, it's when. So the hardest part is for new players to break into it. And that's where, and some people tout about, how horrible franchises are. Franchises are awesome. Do they have negative stamina to them? Not stamina, connotations? Yeah, sure. But also being a mom and pop. Oh, well, they're just a mom and pop. Well, there's nothing wrong with being a mom and pop. If you can get into the industry and survive the first year to 18 months, then you're probably going to be okay. So as long as we don't continue to, there's only so many corners that you can cut to get business to come in. And if we would stop this lunacy of cutting prices and cutting services at the same time, the market would be a whole lot more stable. But when people just keep cutting prices and cutting prices and cutting prices to get business from a competitor, then unfortunately what winds up happening is the quality also gets cut.
Right.
But we have the ability to control that. I don't like the mentality of it's us against the insurance company. I don't like that one iota. But if we continue to push it that way, then yes, they're going to continue to push back. So it's going to become very adversarial, even more so than it is now. But if we would just simply learn how to do what we're doing and do what's right and do what needs to be done and no more and no less and charge for what we did, it would be a whole lot purer system. But I really see it to be a bright and very profitable industry if we'll just keep our nose clean.
Absolutely. So to kind of add to that, racing to the bottom when it comes down to pricing is always a losing game. It's a losing game for you. It's a losing game for the industry, and no one wins. The customer does not win. You as an organization, as an individual, maybe if you're an owner operator and that's it, maybe you can compete on that plane, but ultimately you just gave yourself a really stressful job. That's not the path to growth, right? And you're really diminishing what you're worth by saying, hey, look, this is a, $20,000 project and I'm going to do it for 10, right? Like the reason why I think we see this so much in our industry is because of the profit margins, right? Because once you have the equipment, you have the equipment. Like you already felt the pain. So it's easy for someone to say, yeah, you know what, I'll do it for a fraction of the cost. It's no big deal. But ultimately, you're not going to have the company that you want, that you deserve by doing that. So that being said, if right now you had to start all over again, right? Let's say that you personally were entering the market. What would your game plan look like to build an organization and to be successful? Like what would your first couple of steps be to enter a new market?
All right. So once again, that's kind of a loaded question, because me getting back into the restoration market, I just referred a $340,000 water loss to a friend of mine because I was out of town and teaching a class. But if I had no contacts, if I was just getting into this 100% cold, then I might have to consider the franchise, approach to it, because it doesn't matter how good your hamburger is. Within the first 3 months, you're going to burn through all of your family members and church friends and all that. And they're going to be sick and tired of eating your hamburger. So it really kind of depends upon also your financial background. If you've got, if you got a little bit of money in the bank and you can survive, like I said, about 18 months or so of not a whole lot of business coming in, then I would prefer to be an individual, because then I'm not, tethered, to a franchise, or I'm also not tethered to like a vendor program per se. But guys, I mean, I'm telling you, the best thing, people don't, they start looking outside of their social circle, and they think that they've got to go and knock on insurance companies' doors. Most people go to church of some sort, or they're a member of a gym, or they have a social network. And like if you're a carpenter and you decided to start a restoration company. Well, if you've done work for 1,000 people in the last year or last 5 years, and they already like you, tell them that, hey, I have a new service. And yeah, you may not be a $2 million company, within the first 6 months, but you usually should be able to make enough to be able to survive. The other thing, Rico, is people think all the time that they've got to drop $100,000 into buying equipment. You don't.
It's simply not true, right?
No, you can rent the stuff. You can pretty much rent anything that you need in the restoration industry, other than consumables.
Right.
Now that makes it a little hard if you have, like we just had the 25 tornadoes that broke out a couple of days ago. It's a little hard to get that rental equipment. But stop thinking that you've got to have $150,000 in the bank just to get your business going. You need a vehicle to be able to get from here to there. You need to have a phone number, your business license, or whatever the licensing are that you need. And then you need to, even the marketing is a whole lot easier because of all the, internet and social media. What you need is something to be able to suck water off the floor. Either that or you're going to sub it out to someone else who can suck the water off the floor. And maybe half a dozen, pieces of equipment, air movers and some dehumidifiers, like maybe 20, 25 air movers and a couple of DUs. And then, if you need more than that, rent it from someone else. Guys, get to know someone else. Befriend someone that owns another restoration company. I don't even like the term friendly competitor. I like friendly resources personally. Right. And network with people and, swap stuff back and forth. But if you're just starting out in the business, talk to the people who like you.
Right.
Let them know that you're offering a service. They're going to be your best fans, and they're going to be the ones who wants to take care of their friendly neighborhood Spider-Man.
It's a great thing to reach out to other pros in the industry and not have a chip on your shoulder, because it's amazing what happens when you have conversations with other pros. Things happen. You just have to be putting yourself in a position to actually win. We've approached tons of companies, right, in our own backyard. And we're like, hey, we've got this project. We don't want to deal with it. We're super booked. We're this, we're that. And we've got, instead of a competitive relationship, we've got a symbiotic relationship, because again, we give them something, they give us something. I don't want to deal with this project, but they have a project that they don't want to deal with that fits with what our core of our business works. And it just works phenomenally well. And those opportunities would not have been gotten if you didn't pick up the phone and introduce yourself and say, hey, this is who I am. This is what I do. This is what we're built for. What are you built for? What are your, pain points? How can I alleviate those pain points? Things of that nature. So having more of a collaborative mentality as opposed to a competitive mentality could really be the difference between, a okay business and a phenomenal business.
Right. because I'm not, the relationship that I have with my clients, I'm not scared. A $340,000 loss, people are like, oh my God, they may try to poach your client. Good luck with that.
Right.
If you approach my client's going to call me and say, hey, Bob tried to take me away from you.
Right.
It's the last time I'll ever refer you anything.
Right.
So yeah, there's no reason we can't work together in all this stuff.
Right. Right. So let's talk about instructors. There's a lot of places to get education, to get your training.
Now you can do it online.
You can. How delicately should one be selecting one's instructor?
For the most part, nobody, they just go onto the internet and they go to the IICRC website and they find whatever the closest class to where it is that they need a class.
Right.
In my opinion, Rico, it's not just selecting your instructor, kind of going back to one of the other questions and comments that we talked about earlier. The restoration industry has gotten so busy, and they will hire anybody that they think is an expert, including a lot of companies are bringing in industrial hygienist firms to moisture map their buildings. And just 2 weeks ago, that industrial hygienist, their specialty was ergonomics in a nuclear power plant. And now they're out there with a thermal imaging camera and a moisture meter coming up with God knows what.
Right.
So, and I got to be very careful when I say this, because there's many instructors that are that teach in this industry that are brilliant people that have done. I am where I am because I stand on the shoulders of the giants that came before me. But there's also some instructors that have never swung a hammer a day in their life, and it shouldn't take long. And it depends upon, Rico, your organization and what you're trying to accomplish in the class that you're trying to get. If you're just trying to get a piece of paper to get on the vendors list, third-party administrator program, then you probably don't care. I've had some people call me up and ask me point blank, hey, Rico, what's your pass rate?
Right.
I have about a 94% pass rate in my classes. Oh, okay, well, thank you very much. And I'm like, well, wait a minute, what do you mean? And they're like, well, the instructor that we used to have had none of our people ever failed.
Wow.
And I'm like, so that tells me one thing: you're after a piece of paper.
Right.
So if you're legitimately, Rico, trying to better yourself, in my opinion, you should research who that instructor is. The amount of money that they charge is not necessarily it, but if you can get an instructor who'll come out and charge you $500 a day, or if you got someone that's at $1,200 a day, that probably should tell you why they're at $500 a day.
Right.
Well, they may be just a startup guy who's trying to break into the industry and compete. But, at the end of the day, you should really be vetting who that is, especially now with social media. You can say, okay, who is Mark Cornelius? You can find my company on my Facebook post. You can see the stuff that, in some of the social medias that I'm in. And if you don't want, someone to tell you that cutting every building up to 2 foot is wrong, then you probably don't want to hire me as an instructor. But if you're just, there is, for the most part, very little vetting of the professionals that we bring in, not just as instructors, into our house to, we'll just hire any old fox to guard the hen house kind of thing. So it, in my opinion, would behoove people to not only get referrals, but to find out who that instructor is and what their background is. Because if it's been 30 years since the last time they sucked water off on the floor, then it may not be up to speed on the current technology.
Right. Right. And speaking of technology, actually, before we switch gears, just my 2 cents here. And the reason why I asked that question about vetting, where you're getting your education from, where you're getting your information from, because even if you're there just for a piece of paper, you're still listening, you're still present, right? And there could be some really bad information. I've been in classes where I've been like, whoa, what just happened? How is it that this is supposed to work? Are you sure about this? And I'm like flipping through the book. I'm like, this doesn't mash up.
It doesn't even match the book.
It doesn't match the book at all. So, but like you said, most people just jump online and they're like, okay, I need to get certified by such and such date, or I need my continuing education credits by such and such date. What's around? Who's the first person? Boom, they book it. And that's it. Like
they're done.
Yeah, they're done. It's almost too much of a commodity, right? Whereas, actually taking the time and like, hey, look, like, where am I going to get the absolute best information? I think that there is, a difference in the quality of the information that's out there, right? And how the standards are interpreted.
Well, Rico, here's the thing. I'm going to throw some names out there. You got some big hitters. You got like Barry Costa and Bill Wigan and Bill Yeadon and those kind of guys where people would wait for months, to get in a class with a name like that. And you got Joe Dobbins, and there's just a ton of wealth that are out there. But once again, as more people enter the market, then it becomes easier to get to. And I'm not trying to bash the online stuff at all, because point blank, Rico, we'll come to your facility and build a custom class for you. Even if it isn't, I've got a janitorial company up in Manhattan. They just dropped $1.5 million in equipment this year. And they've had me out there on 3 different occasions for 2 weeks at a time doing training classes with them. And they're not even certification classes. They want to know how to use the equipment because they're not used to doing it. So, my school will come to your place. We'll deliver whatever the classes are that we are allowed to, deliver. We got 9 subject matters that we teach. We also do them online because I'm not going to walk away from that money. But I also know our product is better than a lot of the other things that are out there. But okay, I get it. So Rico, if you need this certification so that your certs don't expire, or you got to get it to stay on the vendor program, that's one thing. I get it. Do that. But then seek additional information. Don't go, well, okay, we crossed the finish line. Well, that was great. But, one of the things, Rico, that I tell my students in every single class, I don't ever claim to be the smartest person in the room. You will never hear me claim that. Secondly, don't take my word for anything. Go out and do your own research. Open the manual. Open the standards. Ignore the Kool-Aid that the sales rep is selling you. I've never met a single sales rep yet, Rico, that tells you that they sell crap, unless you're a manure salesman.
Right.
And then you sell the best crap. Right?
Absolutely.
So, yeah, I get it. There's reasons why people have to do things, but don't stop there. Seek additional information. And guys, as much as I'd love for you to only take classes from my school, if you take the water class from me, in 4 or 5 years, take it from someone else. Take it from another instructor. And yes, unfortunately, Rico, you will hear some instructors say some things that are like totally off the wall.
Right.
And then you got to do your own research and hold them accountable to that.
Right. So let's talk about technology real quick in the sense of chemicals, solutions, things like that. I mean, we're talking off camera a little bit about some of your, preferred solutions and whatnot. So can we talk about that a little bit?
Sure. So probably the biggest thing that has excited me in forever is there's 2 things, and it's mostly mold related. Because back in the day, I'd be in a crawl space with a floor joist about that far away from my nose with a wire brush and having to sand down 1,000 square foot worth of floor joist with a wire brush or a palm sander. Over the last couple of decades of the introduction of peroxide. And yes, I have my preferred product that I use and whatnot, but the peroxide that are out there today makes it to where not only does the wood look pretty, which I really personally could care less if the wood looks pretty. I'm there to make it healthy and safe environment and to be able to pass a clearance test, not a beauty pageant. But the advent of the peroxides and the accelerated peroxides make it to where my cleaning efforts are nowhere near as difficult. And at the end, it also winds up looking pretty as well. But probably the downside to that, Rico, is the fact that they see the color just disappear and they think they're done. You still physically have to clean.
Right.
Now, some of the other stuff that's come along in the time is the spray applicator, that the particular product that I prefer has developed. Also, there's some really cool stuff with inflatable containment that has just recently come onto the market, which I've been playing around with recently. It cuts down the waste, and I'll go ahead and mention their name because they're the only one out there. It's Zeppelin guys called Zeppelin Wall. It's an inflatable containment, and it really cuts down. And I'm not a huge eco kind of guy, but if you don't have to throw away 18 pounds of plastic every time you do a mold job,
right,
then that's a lot of reduction of waste in the landfill.
Absolutely.
So the peroxide, though, as far as a business owner, if something can cut my labor in half If I'm cutting my labor in half, what does that do to my profit margin?
Yeah, exactly. And just finding these ways to decrease the overall effort, increase output. And again, sometimes it comes in the form of equipment. Sometimes it comes in form, in a bottle. It's just finding that solution. What about media blasting? I know that the market is somewhat divided when it comes down to media blasting for certain applications. Some people swear by it. Other people are like, no, it's just stupid. Shouldn't even, waste your time. Some people have mentioned how expensive it is and how, there's lots of different arguments there. What's your take on media blasting for certain applications?
Media blasting for the restoration industry was like going from a Chevette with a wire brush and a hand sander to a Ferrari when you're talking about media blasting. And then in my opinion, from media blasting to peroxides is like going from a Ferrari to a Bugatti. Okay. However, it doesn't matter what the tool is, Rico, they all have pluses and minuses. And even within the media blasting and world, you got baking soda is stupid. You should only use dry ice, and dry ice is dangerous. You should only use baking soda, or you should be using steel shot or glass beads or walnut shells. At the end of the day, you still got to clean stuff up.
Right.
Okay. There's pluses and minuses to all of them. I personally went with a soda blaster after doing my research with it. First of all, the soda blaster machine was less expensive. However, Rico, the big thing of it is that you'll have a more of a chance of failing post-clearance with dry ice. And the reason that I found that was the case, because I've done both. I've done dry ice and baking soda. The people, once again, the visual cue with the dry ice is you don't realize you're taking debris here and putting it into the air, and it's going to go somewhere. But if you can't see it, people are less likely to be as diligent on the cleaning process. With the baking soda, all you have to do is rub your finger across it, and if you have the white powder, you're not done. Yeah, you blasted 50 pounds of baking soda and you're having to scrape up 48.5. Well, that sucks. I get that. But I've never failed a baking soda. Now, with that being said, Rico, the baking soda machine that I own, I do not touch it now that I use peroxide. I haven't personally media blasted a job in years. And the only time I touch my soda blaster is when another company rents it from me. And I pull it out of the garage and set it in the driveway and say, send 2 people to put it in the back of your truck, because I'm not picking the damn thing up.
Right. So peroxide is the way to go then. The preferred method.
For me, I'm a peroxide freak. But the baking soda blaster, it saved my bacon for a long time. It served me well. But I'm not. It's just like buying a conventional refrigerant dehumidifier versus a low grain. Yeah, the conventional will work, but why would I buy a Chevette when I can buy a Ferrari and it's going to do everything I want?
Exactly.
Kind of deal. So yeah, media blasting is awesome, but they do have their downsides.
Right, just like anything else in the business. So, Mark, if someone wants to reach out to your company, what's the easiest social media platform and or website to go ahead and reach out to you to get some more information, maybe sign up for your class, maybe get some training at their facility? Where would they find you?
Okay, well, first of all, you can definitely find me on Facebook. First name Mark, last name Cornelius. Our website is train, like the choo-choo train, and then the letters EMTA, as in Echo Mary Tango Alpha.com. So that would be trainemta.com. It's about as simple as it can get. Or you can email me, and that would be mark@trainemta.com.
Amazing. So, Mark, I just want to go ahead and thank you so much for taking the time today to, give us your insight in the business and tons of information. For those of you listening and watching to the show, all of Mark's contact information is going to be in the show notes and in the video description below. Make sure that you reach out. Support the show by supporting our guests. If he could be of service to you, I'm sure that he'll be more than happy to do so. And Mark, again, thank you so much, brother, and we'll definitely have to do this again.
Rico, my pleasure. I look forward to it, but I have one more parting statement.
Oh, let's go.
Do good so you can be good.
Amen. And on that note, we're rolling.
You've been listening to Restoration Domination. interviewing the restoration business's top industry insiders, the movers and shakers, the hustlers and hackers. We hope you've gotten some useful and practical information from the show. Make sure to like, rate, and review. And we'll be back soon. But in the meantime, hook up with us on Instagram. Find Rico at Rico Garcia Jr. And check out the YouTube channel at Restoration Domination. Till next time, this is Restoration Domination. Hustle, hack, dominate.